Hello and welcome to another episode here in the capture part of the texture series. And this time I want to talk a little bit about the production of depth map or displacement maps or whatever you like to name it. So the idea is here that we have just a single disk with no modeling on it, and we get exactly here this. And I show you the original idea later on. But before I do this, I want to show you, of course, what it takes to make something like this and what maybe not work at all, but you might have a different idea. And so I share my little failure here with the experiments and my thoughts about this. I thought it's maybe fun to watch, and maybe you get a little bit more out of it than I did. And so let's get started. The idea that I have here in this material is pretty simple. In the displacement I have just a map, and when I open this you can see exactly what we got here. It's just gray values, dark, and then it goes to a brighter value. And of course you want to see what it caused to be in this way. And so let's go first to Lightroom to see the experiments that I have done and my conclusions, and then we go to the preparation of this one here. The idea is, of course, that I have a fluid where I put maybe ink in it or a different fluid that I will show you later on. And when I have here my aquarium, then I thought I'd just use ink for some objects that I have here. And of course they should be normally completely dull and white or just black. And I have here just black ink. And I thought I'd just pour this ink in. First of all, the ink created foam. That's maybe not so bad, but it wasn't really black. That was the next part. And that would be also solvable. But then I found out that all the reflections and the light from the side produce, of course, a lot of problems. I tell you that all so you can avoid all of that. And I covered then the whole aquarium with cardboards, and I put something over my head so no light from the top came in, which caused the next problem. And you can see here that we can't really see any difference in depths here at all. So I would have the need to have this object completely in white and completely dull, so we have no reflections on it. And then, of course, black ink. And the more depths I have, the more darker it becomes. That should be then only illuminated from light from the top, not from the side, of course. And we should have no foam here inside and no dirt or whatever. So this was the first time that I have done this. I wanted to do this for the series to show that, and the failure here was so great that I thought, wow, I never have learned so much in 1 hour. Okay, so next thing. I thought, okay, let's go and try something different. And here this little plate where you normally get cookies in or something like that in your supermarket, I thought, okay, it's black, and let's fill this with water and put some milk in, because then I have a black object. It's not dull. That was the first problem. And I put milk in, just a little sip, and everything was white. Okay, so I had to unpour it, and I had to put water back into it, and only a few drops of milk, and then stir it up, few more drops until I got it. And I put this weight here inside because I said it's a little reflective, so I can show the problems that I had, because from these problems we can learn. So I filled it up here, and you can see it works to a certain degree. And what I have done here as well is to take the light from left to right, and in other pictures I had then different specular highlights. So I could say, please, Photoshop, take always the darkest point from all of these images. So I could go rid of these specular highlights, which worked fine, but the reflection of that, as expected, stayed exactly. So no depth map from here. This here worked fairly good, but not really. I was not really convinced. It was more like this shape combined with noise. So the conclusion here is the object has to be completely dull and black when I want to use these few drops of milk. And then it might work for something that has really depths. But of course, it needs also a very good light situation. Finally, I had here my shot, and I thought, okay, I can do this much faster by hand, and of course I had to check this out as well. And to keep the time pretty short, I have prepared everything, and I want to show you that, of course. This is the whole idea, and I have covered here already the area that I don't want to use. And the first idea was, of course, just to make everything white. Wait, I can't see a thing, so back to that. And the first thing is to give here just a little gradient in, so I have a different size here. And I go further with this. I make a gradient from here to here. That's always a gradient, and here radial, and you have to set up here the color. And of course, when I go here inside of that, double click, should give me this. And then I have to move these sliders so I can go from the middle point and get here only the gradient in that area. I have done this again because I don't want to have anything here. And then I have created this area, and I have to move this down a little bit. And this is just done here with the path tool. Just one time around, then fill this and then blur it a little bit. And the whole thing here, as you can see, is multiplied and has an opacity of 27 in this example. And when I multiply it, it takes over exactly that gradient, but it gets a little bit darker. So dark is here on top and the brighter areas here is lower. That means I get here my depth map in that way. And these guys here move then nicely and slowly downhill. The next part was then that plastic that we had inside, and this is also here just a path, which I filled then after I got it. I can show you that here. This would be a path, and with a command click you can make a selection out of that, and then you can just drag a gradient, a linear gradient then inside when you want to have an area like this here. Okay, so far the good. Command D to get rid of that. And then we have the next part here. Because they are all the same, so I could just copy them. And then with a rotation around in the middle point, Command T, always around, to have 2, merge them, then move them around again, to have 4, and then one time more after merging. And I got these guys. And go a little bit down here. So I got also this guy here. I have to take this here away, so I have nothing double here. Of course, now I have it. And I wanted to have a little ring here, so that fits with the whole situation. That was a little bit too bright in the middle, and I put Cineversity in. I left it out after a while, and I did it again, and I made it a little bit darker. So this is all in 16-bit. 8-bit for depth map with displacement is not a good idea. 16-bit in one channel works nice. And finally, I merged all of that with a tiny little bit in it. I did it again, and then I took here an alpha channel to get the nice mask. And that's pretty much everything I have done. Merged it and saved it out, so we don't have all these layers in Cinema 4D. The idea is, of course, before you merge everything, that you have for every tiny little detail here then just an opacity that fits exactly what you want to have, so you can adjust the height finally. And when you have a good base here with the black, the gradient, and here in the middle that area, then you can adjust exactly how high these parts finally go or how deep they go. And with a little blur always you get nice shapes and gradients here. So you really paint with gray values then depths into the whole situation. So let's hop over to Cinema 4D and have another look. So this texture is now inside of Cinema 4D. It's pretty simple, just load it in, and we have not the need to do anything else. If it is too sharp or too jaggy, maybe you dial in 1% of blurriness, or maybe 2. That helps in some cases. The height is important, and here with the strength 100% plus or negative, you get exactly the direction that you want to have. The alpha channel was as shown, just the disk here. I have the reflection on and nothing else. I could have here the bump channel inside with a noise, for example, to give something of natural problems into the material because nothing is super perfect, but for the sake of simplicity I leave it out here, and then I can render this here again. So, and here we have our result already, and this is now here really 3D. It takes of course a little bit time, as you can see here, 39 seconds on my laptop here. That might go faster, and I have a high resolution here, and the beauty of that is it exists now really. So when we cast light here on this object, the shadow will move along these surfaces, which is very nice. And as a side effect, when we take here that tag on that object, the bake texture tag, we can switch on here the normals, and when we switch on the normals we can render out a normal path, and I would suggest normally to have a high resolution here, to use 32-bit per channel float. The color profile should be normally linear, which is the case when we use OpenEXR, even if it is a standard RGB. And if you want to super sample it, I wouldn't do this. It's not needed because we talk about values here and not about pictures. And the pixel border here of 1, yeah, if needed. I would think it's not needed at all. And then we have to render it out, and that's pretty much it. In the normals you can check here of course if flip X, flip Y or so, but you can do this then later on here in the material, and I'll show you what happens. I switch off the displacement and I take a look here in the normal mapping. It takes some time, and I open this, and this is the baked texture that I created here from this object with a normal map. And this is normally used in the game industry a lot because it creates already a simulation of a surface that has this kind of form or shape. And when I render this here now without displacement, this is here just a disk, then I can see here we get some reflection in it. That needs of course some setup here to get really the reflection that I want to have, but you see here the light works very nicely already with it. But the downside of these objects is of course they are really flat, there's no real geometry finally generated, and when it becomes hit from light, or better said from shadow, it will have no effect here. The shadow will go like on a flat surface. Anyway, what I wanted to show here was the generating of a devs map, and I hope I could give you some tips where you can experiment with. And how I solved this finally was of course a complete different story than I started with, but objects in a milky fluid should be completely dull and black, and when you use ink for example, then it should be dull and white. And everything that reflects will reflect of course maybe the milky fluid in itself, and then you get completely different values for this. So it's a little bit tricky, and I think to give you just some tips that was okay. And how to create it in Photoshop, that's more the case how I like to do it, slowly and precise. No, fast and precise, and that's all what I want to tell you here for the moment. Thanks for listening, have fun with it, bye bye.